So hello, thank you for being here, especially so early. I know it's early in the morning, and I appreciate you coming, waking up and coming to this weird talk at a Python conference. So, emotional intelligence for engineers. So, I want to address the elephant in the room. This is a Python conference, so who's this lady, and why is she here to talk to us about our feelings? Well, I'm glad you asked. So, hypothetically. So my name is April Wensel, and I'm a software engineer, and I have been for the past decade. I've worked at a number of different startups in Silicon Valley, and I've led engineering teams, including some using Python for some interesting stuff in machine learning to detect autism in kids, a few other things with Python. I'm a big fan of Python. And as far as why I'm here, so every talk at this conference is really about how to become a more effective developer, and I think that this talk is no different, because I truly believe that emotional intelligence is key to becoming the most effective developer that you can be. Also, I know that the Python community is a big fan of inclusion, especially in recent years, and so emotional intelligence is key to creating inclusive environments. So a little more about me. I come from San Diego. I took this picture the day before I left, so all of this water coming from the sky is very foreign to me, but I'm trying to make do. Other than that, I'm very much enjoying your city. So I just tried this place, the Sunflower Cafe, a recommendation from Justin Hoover, and it was delicious. This is all vegan. It's a barbecue sandwich and sweet potato casserole, just amazing. So very, very happy to be here in your city. Okay, so I want to go over the plan for this talk. I'm going to talk about what emotional intelligence is, why you should care about it. I'm going to focus a lot of time on that because I think it's important, and how you develop it. So my company is called Compassionate Coding, and I do workshops on emotional intelligence for engineers. But before all that, I used to be kind of a jerk. I have detailed my jerk days in this blog post, which has actually gotten some attention online. Including some attention on Reddit, where people are not always the most emotionally intelligent in their communication. So I got some interesting jerky comments on a post about being a jerk, but that's okay, because none of them were as jerky as me, as I am to myself. But anyway, in this post, I talk about how I used to be very focused on just the technical side. I thought, okay, if I'm perfectly logical and rational, because of course I am, right? I'm a programmer, then I don't have to worry about other people's emotions. That's their problem. If they're offended by what I say, that's their problem. I also, so I was so totally focused on that. I am very not emotionally intelligent, actively anti-emotionally intelligent. So I mentioned this because to all of any of the negative Nancys or Netties in the audience who are thinking, this is a stupid soft talk, I assume there probably aren't that many of you because you chose to be here, but if you came just to heckle, I encourage it, but let's save it to the end so that it's less distracting for everyone else. But yes, so if you are feeling that skeptical, I understand. I have deep empathy for you because I also would have made fun of this talk and thought it was silly. So please bear with me. So the one exception to the not heckling is I'm trying to avoid using guys for mixed gender groups. So I would say this is not a picture of guys. This photo comes from this great site, womenofcolorintechtchat.com, where you can access stock photos of women in color and tech. I would also say that this is not a group of guys, also not a group of ladies. So I'm going to try to use these terms: folks, everybody, everyone, people, all, and because I'm in the South and I'm from Texas, y'all, friends, and team. So if you hear me say guys when I'm referring to a mixed gender group or a group of unknown gender, then just raise your hand, and because I want to get better. So thank you for helping me out with that. So emotional intelligence, what is it? I'd like to talk about what it's not. So it's not just being fake. It's not just being nice. It is not ignoring logic and reason. I thought this was a really cool picture. It's supposed to be a Rubik's Cube. It's been destroyed. So we're not destroying or forgetting logic and reason. It's not sugarcoating. So this is what I used to think it was. And that's why I hated it so much, because I was like, we should just be direct to each other. We shouldn't be sugarcoating. And it turns out it's not sugarcoating. So just to be clear, it's not that. It also doesn't mean being an extrovert or a social butterfly. I get that sometimes where people think, well, I'm an introvert. I'm an introvert, okay? And I am definitely by no means a social butterfly. And I still think you're able to build emotional intelligence. So it's not that. It's also not being completely ruled and dominated by your emotions, your unbridled emotions. I posted about giving this talk on LinkedIn, and some LinkedIn also gets some interesting trolls. But somebody commented, and they're like, yeah, emotions are great and all, but we don't want to be, but it's important to, keep them in check. And I'm like, that's what emotional intelligence is about. So why would you, anyway, so it's not being ruled by your emotions. Emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage emotions, which I'm using the word emotion in it, so it's not a great definition. So to give more some specifics, these are some of the examples of aspects of emotional intelligence: self-awareness, confidence, empathy, achievement, collaboration, motivation, resilience, conflict management, ton of other things. But that's the kind of genre that we're talking about. You may know them by the term soft skills. This is a term that I hate, and I very rarely use the word hate because I think it adds a lot of negativity to the world, but I'm using it here because I feel this passionately about it. I hate the word soft skills. Why? Because one, softness has become associated with weakness in our culture. So we say things like, he's gone soft, to mean, he's gotten weak or something like that. I also think it's weirdly associated just with women. So in the early 90s, there were these commercials, come see the softer side of Sears. And it was when Sears introduced, in addition to the hardware that they were selling, accessories and clothing for women. And it's not that soft skills being associated with women is bad because women are bad, but rather because it's a limited view. And I think soft skills, quote, are for emotional intelligence really is for everyone, not just women, not just people, who identify with their femininity. It's really for everyone. So to illustrate this, this example was gifted to me by the universe, because when I was on my way to another conference where I was giving this talk, I stepped onto an airport shuttle, and they were talking about the Super Bowl. And they were talking about Doug Peterson, who I guess is the coach of the Eagles. And since they won, I kept a slide in. If they had lost, I would have taken it out. But they said Doug Peterson really has emotional intelligence. And they used that word, that term, and I was so excited. He recognizes that football is not just a tactical game, but a psychological game. And I was just like, yes, if emotional intelligence is associated with football, then how can we possibly call it a soft skill? So please stop calling them soft skills. Please, please, please. Please also don't call them people skills, because people skills has become the punchline of jokes. So this is from the movie Office Space, and the people who have come to do layoffs ask this guy what his job is. I used guy, but he is a man, so it's okay, no hands. So they ask him what he does, and he mentions that he takes requirements from the customer and takes them to the engineers, and he insists, and they act like confused, and he insists, I have people skills. And so it's, people skills is easy to make fun of because it's become kind of cliche and trite. So instead, I recommend that we use this term catalytic skills. Now, this comes from a talk that I saw by Daniel Goleman. He was giving a talk at Google, and you can watch it on YouTube at this link. And he calls them catalytic skills because they help us catalyze our technical skills, meaning they help us acquire new technical skills and apply them more effectively. So I think I would love it if we ditch the term soft skills altogether, call them catalytic skills. Okay. So why should you care about any of this? So let's talk about why software projects fail. So this data, this is a subset of reasons that software projects fail. The Application Developers Alliance surveyed 850 software developers. Not a huge group, but whatever, it's somewhere to start from. And here's some of the reasons that they gave. So the ones in blue, you'll see changing or poorly documented requirements, poor team or organizational management, developer churn, or loss of key talent. These are all things that would benefit from emotional intelligence. Then way on the end, not insignificant, but less than the others, you have immature dev tools and application platforms. But I feel like a lot of the discourse in tech is around how to optimize the dev tools and application platforms. And really, that's not why software projects are failing. I mean, some of them are, that's one reason, but largely it's more on the human side that our projects are failing. And you can read more in that study there. Another study, so in 1994, but it's still highly relevant, we still haven't fixed it, there's this paper that came out, The Essential Competencies of Software Engineers, and there's this very tiny table that's not important to you all right now, but you can access the paper there. And again, I'm going to put these slides up so you can see all of this better. But the top 3 competencies that they listed are that exceptional software engineers are team-oriented, they seek help, and they help others Wow, okay. So those are all aspects of emotional intelligence. Another reason you should care. So it seems like every week there's a new article about burnout in tech. I've also written one, which is accessible there. And I think that's because burnout really happens when we're not able to control our responses to situations and when we feel kind of powerless, and emotional intelligence can really help with that. So I know we like to think, I certainly used to think, that I came to work and I shut off my emotions. I'm completely rational, completely logical. I'm just debating issues using pure reason. And it's just not true. So I hate to break it to you, but you are not a robot. You're not, none of you. You're a human being. And every single human being has emotions. Every single one. Apple CEO Tim Cook, in a commencement address last year, said, "I'm not worried about artificial intelligence giving computers the ability to think like humans. I'm more concerned about people thinking like computers." So even if we could think like robots, it wouldn't be a good idea because we're humans and we need to care about each other. So as a software engineer, here are some of the things that you do on a daily basis, potentially, that could benefit from emotional intelligence. Giving effective feedback in code reviews, naming variables really benefits from empathy. Designing APIs also benefits from empathy, which is an aspect of emotional intelligence. Negotiating with designers or product managers, rallying support for a new tool. Quick story there, I was at a company and we were using a remote conferencing tool called Sococo. And the quality was really bad and it was always crashing because of how big our team was. So some of us suggested we use Zoom. And we prepared this very logical document, this spreadsheet comparing the pros and cons, and we tried to rally support. And everyone was so emotional about it. And it turned out that it wasn't because of the pros and cons, that they weren't convincing, because the people who liked Sococo so much felt that it helped them feel more it contributed to their sense of belonging on the team because it had these little pictures of little offices, like a virtual office. And for some reason, they had grown emotionally attached to this tool. And so their response was so emotional because of that. So it was hard. So we needed to elevate the conversation from just a purely rational level to really address it on a human level. So even rallying support for a new tool, new framework can benefit from emotional intelligence. Also being able to motivate yourself to learn new skills. Interviewing candidates, definitely a big one here, to be able to put people at ease and to not rule out people unfairly through your interview style, and also to mentor new hires. I would also suggest that the Agile Manifesto is a way of layering emotional intelligence onto software development. So I went through all of the principles of the Agile Manifesto and called out which elements of emotional intelligence each one addresses. So here's just one example. So one of the principles is we welcome changing requirements, even late in development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. In this, you can see empathy, service orientation, adaptability, optimism, and initiative, which are all aspects of emotional intelligence. So Jerry Weinberg wrote this great book, The Psychology of Computer Programming, in the early 70s. And he said, it is possible to be too smart for programming if the person is not smart enough to use his intelligence to modify his social behavior and methods of conversation, which I thought is a nice quote. And it was the 70s, which is why it uses his, but I wanted to present it with fidelity, so there it is. Okay. There are also some personal benefits, many personal benefits to growing emotional intelligence. It helps reduce your stress, improves your productivity, helps you with better relationships, increases your happiness. And I know citation needed, so please visit the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley's website because they have tons of research-backed studies on this, so that's why I have no citation for each one. You can do your research. You can take my word for it, or you can decide, I've decided that I don't necessarily need absolute proof of something working before I'm willing to experiment it if it has a low investment. So I've also seen these in my own life. Okay, so assuming now that you're at least somewhat interested in developing your emotional intelligence, let's talk about how to do it. So I like to use a metaphor that's not unfamiliar to people in tech. So hopefully most of you are familiar with the idea of being on call. I saw over the past day there's been a lot of discussion on Twitter. People are debating on call. I haven't really been following it, but there apparently, most people understand this idea of being on call, but just to make it clear. So if your site goes down or if there's some kind of problem on your app or your website, somebody will get a notification Probably not on an actual device like this anymore, but that's, you're on call. So being a human is kind of like being on call all the time, and your distressing emotions are like alerts. And similarly to how when you don't deal with an alert properly on your system, it's similar to when you do that as a human, disaster strikes. So what does it look like if you don't handle your emotional alerts properly? Well, Daniel Goleman says, out of control emotions can make smart people stupid. And what he means by that, or some examples, you might, if you're very emotional about something, what you might do is send an email that you later regret. I may or may not have done this in the past. You may send a Slack message that isn't particularly kind. You may, yell at somebody and say something that you regret. You also just may be so distracted by how angry you are that you're not productive anymore. So this is why it's helpful to be able to manage your distressing emotions. And this is just one aspect of emotional intelligence, but I feel like it illustrates the bigger picture here. So that's the one we're going to focus on. So I'd like to present to you an emotional incident runbook. So similar to how when there's an alert on your system, sometimes you'll have some kind of runbook, you might call it a playbook, and it's a list of things that you can do to help troubleshoot the site. So maybe it's, where to look in the logs to see if something's broken, or, who to contact about this or that, or what to look for in the database, or whatever it may be to troubleshoot. So I'm going to do that, but for your emotional incidents. So here's the process I'd like to present, which is slowing down, tending to your needs, offering empathy, and proceeding calmly. These are the steps you can take whenever you find yourself in the middle of an emotional incident. It spells out stop, which is nice, easy to remember. So we'll go through each one in turn. The first one is slow down, which is a bit ironic because I'm a fast talker and I'm saying slow down, but it's very important. So I took a meditation class a few years ago, and the instructor was talking about how our anxious mind is kind of like a jar of water that's full of sediment that's been shaken up, and all of our anxious thoughts are like the sediment. And that meditation, or just slowing down in an informal way, allows the sediment or the anxious thoughts to settle so that we have clarity in the jar, meaning you can see through the water, but also metaphorically in your mind. You have more clarity about your situation. That's why it's so important. True story, I dropped that meditation class after the second class because I thought it was moving too slowly, and I thought I could just read this and get this done faster. So I had a lot to learn, but I think I've made some progress since then. So the next one was tending to your needs. So what are needs? What do we even mean by this? So here are some examples of needs. They come from a book called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Highly recommend this book. So we have basic needs like shelter, rest, food, safety. We also have needs like autonomy, creativity, meaning, love, respect, trust, closeness, community, fun, laughter, beauty, order, peace. Some of the time we have spiritual needs. These are examples of needs that we could be experiencing, and they definitely affect our emotional responses. So the empathy piece is trying to understand what the other person is feeling, valuing, and needing. So you slow down, you understand your needs, you tend to them if you can first, you understand what the other person's feeling, and then you proceed calmly with what you've decided based on all that information. So I'd like to walk through an example just because that really helps. And this may be difficult to read, so I'm going to read it out. It's actually difficult for me to read on here, so I'm going to get a little closer. But yeah, so here's an example of an exchange between two developers. And please imagine them as whatever gender you would like. I tried to use names that are commonly used for multiple genders. So the first one says, Alex, I saw that you set the points on a story by yourself again. We're supposed to vote as a team. Now they're discussing an issue tracker where you set points on a story like in Agile software development. And the other developer says, I never agreed to that. The story was just a quick task. What does it matter? We have a process in place and we're supposed to stick to it. You always do that, bring up process. We waste so much time talking about process. I just want to get things done. And you're always being reckless and breaking things. We have processes in place for a reason. If you can't stick to them, maybe you shouldn't be on the team. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't. Whoa, okay, that escalated quickly. So this is what happens when we don't apply emotional intelligence. We think we're having a perfectly rational debate about process and this and that, but you can tell people's emotions are definitely involved here, even if what they're saying, could be potentially just rational. So let's walk through the steps. So slow down. So the first is, just because you see something that bothers you, don't just immediately jump in and try to, criticize someone or tell them why they're wrong, right? So let's take a step back and try to unwind this a bit. Okay, so Morgan sees that Alex has set the story points without consulting the team. Okay, so what is it likely that Morgan values in this situation? I would say that Morgan values order, organization, structure, process. Why does this person value these things? Well, I would imagine it's because Morgan would like to deliver value to the customers in an organized and productive, efficient way. So what does Alex value in this situation? It seems to me like Alex values moving quickly, not getting weighed down by excessive process. And why would Alex value that? Well, probably because Alex would like to deliver value to the customer efficiently and productively. So really, if you take the time to slow down, you realize, hey, we're both on the same team, and probably our end goal is actually the same. So although we may have some different values in between, we don't need to have this really hostile exchange. Okay, so slowed down, we've looked at the needs, so let's proceed calmly. So let's see how this conversation could go. So Morgan instead says, Alex, when I saw that you set the points on a story without consulting anyone, I felt concerned because I need to trust that we share responsibility as a team. Can you explain what happened? Alex says, the story was just a quick one-point task. What does it matter? Morgan says, it seems like you value moving quickly and feel that process sometimes gets in the way. Is that right? And Alex says, well, yeah, I don't want to talk about process. I just want to get things done. Morgan says, I also want to get things done. It's also important to me that I feel a sense of order. Would you be willing to send a quick note to the team when you point a story on your own so that at least we know? And then Alex says, yeah, I guess I can do that. So what you'll see in this example is I didn't create a magical world where both people are applying these techniques. In this situation, pretty much only Morgan is applying these techniques, but it can still work. So, and you can reach a solution where, because you remember what the end goal is, you can come to something that both people can agree with. So I know if you're like me, when I was first learning about this, what a waste of time to have to do this in every conversation. Well, one, you don't have to do it in every conversation because sometimes you build up rapport with people so that you don't need to, you're unlikely to have an emotional incident every single time. But when you do feel yourself getting emotional, like when you feel your heart starting to beat faster, your fight or flight mechanisms are kicking in, that's really when you know that you need to slow down and work through these steps. So I've given you kind of a starter guide to this emotional incident run book, but like I said, it's a much bigger picture here with emotional intelligence, and you'll start to notice patterns, the things that you value so much that trigger you and trigger that emotional response. So for example, some people value fairness, right? So if something at work happens that seems unfair, which is one of the most common complaints in the workplace, then you may feel yourself getting emotional. So it's really about just being able to communicate those needs in a productive way. And it really takes practice, a lot of practice, I can tell you, somebody who's had to make this transition, but it's so worth it. And the whole time I think it's important to keep in mind a growth mindset, which means let's not say, I'm not a people person, or I'm an introvert, or I'm an engineer, I'm not a manager, so why do I have to care about people? But instead think, hey, these skills can help me be more effective in my job, so I'm gonna work to develop them over time, and I'm gonna be patient with myself as I'm learning this. So to this point, I would like to at least do a little exercise with you to give you an example with this. Don't worry, no one's going to have to say anything, and we're talked anyway. So that always worries me when I'm in a session. So don't worry, none of that. It's all going to happen in here. So think about a time when you lost control of your emotions. So when you yelled at somebody or you wrote an angry email, we all do it. You know, you at least in your head really have gotten angry at somebody. I guarantee it. And if not, again, you can heckle me at the end about this. Okay, so think of an incident. And if you're having trouble recalling something, I would say an easy one is getting stuck in traffic. Everyone gets so annoyed in traffic, right? Because someone cuts you off, or someone's not going fast enough, someone's doing something differently. So I'm gonna pause for a few seconds and just let you think and try to call to mind an incident. And again, you're not gonna have to tell anyone about this, so it doesn't matter if it's about work, personal life, whatever. But think about a time when you feel that maybe you said something you regret, or you did something a little bit that was clearly motivated by out of control emotions, okay? So let's take a few seconds. So hopefully you have one in mind. If not, you can use the car one, because that one probably works. And if you don't drive, you could think about when you've had to wait in a really long line, perhaps at the DMV or somewhere else. You could be at the DMV if you don't, even if you don't drive, I guess. But or like maybe in line at an amusement park or something. Okay. So then, keeping in mind that incident that you thought of, what would have happened if maybe you'd slowed down? Okay. Think about what were your needs in that moment. So let's see in the traffic example. So when I'm stuck in traffic, and I actually get more upset when somebody's like tailgating me, because I've been rear-ended before, and so I kind of have this fear around that. So when somebody is tailgating me, what I feel is fear. I feel fear. I feel annoyance, because I'm like, don't they know that there's a certain following distance that we learned when we took the driver's test, and they're supposed to be following that? And I actually drive quickly, so it's surprising to me when it happens. But anyway, so that's what I'm valuing. So then, I could just say, oh, what a jerk, right? But that's not what we're going to do here. So we're going to think, okay, offer empathy. Why is this person tailgating me? What are they feeling, valuing, and needing? Well, I suspect that they are trying to get somewhere quickly. Maybe they're in a rush because of something, distressing happening in their life. Maybe it's just trying to get home to see their family. But for some reason, they're in a hurry. Maybe they had a bad day and they feel powerless, and this is, tailgating me is how they're trying to assert their dominance. I don't know what it is, but I can think about these possibilities to help build empathy. And then I can proceed calmly. So what are my options? Yeah, I could just like slam my brakes, right? But I try to avoid that. I do sometimes tap, but not in an annoying way, but more in just like, I'm scared way. But again, I can't control how it's interpreted. But maybe I can change lanes. Maybe I could get off. I could actually get off the highway, take an exit, and then maybe, try again and hope for the best. But there are things I could do, but what I'm not going to do is get angry. And I'm not going to, try to get behind them and then honk or flash my brights or something. I'm going to do something calmly. So in your situation, see, what were you needing? What were you needing? And what was the other person needing? And if no one else was involved, you can just focus more on what you were needing, or what, how you were reacting to your situation. So again, let's take a few seconds where I used that example, but to try to help. But since I was talking that whole time, it would have been hard for you to do both parts. So I'm going to pause again, try to think about what you were needing in that distressing moment that you thought of, and what anyone else involved in that situation was needing. So again, you don't have to share, but you can just think of that. And I would try to do that on a daily basis. And again, it takes time, because there's so much annoying stuff that happens in life. There are going to be people who have totally different values from you, that do really things that just really irritate you because of your values. And so, just try to remember on a daily basis remember to stop and implement these steps. The last time I gave this talk, step 3 was empathize, so it's spelled step, and I realized that didn't really make sense, and I was like, wait a second, I have to change it to offer empathy, and it stopped, so I'm pretty happy with this, gotta say. Okay, so yes, emotional intelligence helps you become more effective as an individual. Yes, it can help build more effective teams, but I think there's a bigger picture here. I think the problems we're facing in tech all relate to this lack of concern for human beings. And by problems we're facing in tech, I mean, yes, the lack of inclusion and diversity. Yes, the fact that there's a lot of unethical choices made in tech. Yes, the fact that we're building products that can be addictive and that can be hurtful to society. And I think all of that relates to a lack of concern for human beings. So I think that's the bigger picture here. I think Karen Armstrong says it well. She writes, if it is not tempered by compassion and empathy, reason can lead men and women into a moral void. And I would say that's what's happened in tech right now, because we've been so obsessed with just the technical side, the logic, the reason. We really let compassion and empathy go by the wayside. And because of that, we've really created a moral void in tech. So this is a meditation garden that's near me where I live in Encinitas. And I didn't take this picture because I thought it would be not cool to break out my phone at a meditation garden. So I got this from their website. But I go there, and it's a beautiful view of the ocean. And they have this little booklet, and I read this quote, and it really spoke to me, so I wanted to share it with you. When people speak of political, social, or international problems, they often do not realize that these conditions are nothing more than the accumulated thoughts and actions of millions of individuals. And the only way to change world conditions is to change ourselves. So I really think the even bigger picture is this is not just about tech. applying these skills of emotional intelligence can be so important and can be so powerful to create a more peaceful world where we actually care enough about each other to understand where we're coming from. I think we could make a really big difference here. So with that, thank you very much. I did take this picture also near me, so this one I can take credit for. Here's my newsletter is at compassionatecoding.com. It's also my website, blog posts, stuff like that. I'm going to be having a course on how to avoid burnout in tech coming out soon. So please sign up if you're interested in any of that, or just getting free resources or staying in touch or whatever. Thank you very much.